So today I wanted to talk about being in the squeeze and how to kind of surrender to divine timing when we're in that really pinchy place where we're feeling stuck and frankly, really agitated or maybe anxious to make moves. What does it mean to surrender to divine timing in moments like that? Broadly speaking, what do I mean by the squeeze? That squeeze is, I'm sure we've all experienced that at one point or another in our lives, that uncomfortable place, that place where we're wanting things to change or we're wanting things to happen, but nothing's really taking, or we're feeling indecisive, or we're just generally feeling like we're not going anywhere. Maybe we're moving in place. Maybe there's a lot of activity, but nothing seems to be gaining traction, or we're feeling uncertain about where we're headed. Things aren't clear. And I wanted to speak to this concept of, well, how can we apply this idea of divine timing? And for those of you that know me, I'm pretty spiritually woo-woo at moments, but I think even if you don't have a spiritual practice, I think that there's a lot to be learned from the concept of being patient in moments like the squeeze, and learning to discern the difference between when you're procrastinating to avoid dealing with something versus allowing yourself to let things unfold as they need to, right? So I wanted to start a conversation with that with you, and how I've seen it sort of apply in my own life, maybe to give some anecdotes, to give some examples, to really just show that there are alternatives out there. Speaking from my own experience, I think I grew up really feeling like I was told by many, many mentors and adults that it's like, take action, do the thing, follow the rules, do this trajectory, like go, go, go. If you just put enough effort and energy into something, it will happen. Like you will make it happen. You will make the thing, right? And I'm not poo-pooing that. I mean, I think that was very successful for me for a very long period of time, especially in a patriarchal society that really focuses most importantly on what we produce, on what outcomes we produce. That fixation on producing results really can be an incredible motivating factor. Man, you get a lot done when you feel like that's how everyone's judging you, or you're judging yourself based on the results that you're producing. Which is why I think being in the squeeze, when it happens, because it happens to all of us, feels so problematic and is so fucking hard to deal with, because you're not producing results. In fact, that's really how I characterize the squeeze for myself, is when it's really unclear what I'm supposed to be doing or how I'm supposed to be moving forward. It's actually the absence of results that really is when the squeeze feels its most uncomfortable, actually. And I think I've learned over time that lack of production, that lack of output, that lack of seeing results is actually generating something bigger, something outside of what my concept of what's possible, or what's available. And it's the time in sitting without any clear direction that actually allows me, my brain, my imagination, my creativity to really stretch beyond the limits that I had kind of set for myself. And that's what I mean by divine timing. For me, I speak about the universe, and I speak about these ways in which I feel really guided by an inner calling. But even if that isn't how you relate to this, or that doesn't really resonate with you, the concept of giving yourself patience, and allowing yourself to see your ideas unfold over time, I think is kind of a lost art, especially in a corporate world in particular, that demands output at regular intervals and needs checks to show progress reports and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, sometimes the progress isn't regular. It's not linear, in fact, most often. And holding ourselves to that actually creates a lot of stress around not feeling good enough or not having done enough. And I think, speaking again from my own personal experience here, it's learning, or rather unlearning, unlearning that output didn't have to come in a direct linear fashion, one thing after the other. I think has ultimately helped me be way more creative for sure. But actually enjoy the process. Can I say that? Is that like, enjoy the process of being in the squeeze sometimes? I mean, I don't know necessarily that I love being in the squeeze, but I recognize it for what it is, and I recognize it for the time and the space it's affording me to let my ideas unfold in their own time. So let's speak to an example, because I think that will help kind of illustrate what I mean. So my pandemic pivot, I'm soliciting other people's examples and stories of this. So if you have one, feel free to reach out to me directly on the contact sheet, Instagram, wherever you know to find me, because I would love to hear what your pandemic pivot is. But my pandemic pivot is really how Deduce Designs took off. It existed prior to the pandemic, but I think prior to the pandemic, I had not given it the time and the space that it deserved in order to become a fully fleshed out idea. Prior to that, I kept trying to fit this idea into little cookie cutters of like what I'd seen other people do, and it never fit. And as a consequence, I was always disappointed and frustrated that it wasn't working out. And that was the narrative that I think I had been telling myself at the time, was like, oh, I can't be a freelancer. Oh, I can't be a digital nomad. Oh, I can't this, I can't that. Nothing that I'm doing is working or doesn't seem right. And while it was true, it wasn't right. It's because I hadn't allowed the idea to expand beyond the self-imposed limits that I'd set for it. That, well, if you're a digital nomad, like this is how it looks. It looks like this, right? Like this is, the way that it is. Or if you're a freelancer, it looks like this. This is how it looks. Or, coaching only looks like this, or whatever it is, right? And it took years, literally, of me traveling around and banging my head up against, well, this doesn't fit, and this doesn't fit, and this doesn't fit, and this doesn't fit, and feeling pretty frustrated. And when the pandemic hit, I had been in a place where I was, again, taking on temporary work to kind of be a stopgap for me while I was sorting everything out. And then the pandemic hit, and well, that work didn't work out, which is fine. I was very lucky and very blessed to be in a place and in a space where, the downturn in economic activity, I had enough savings set aside that I could kind of just coast along for a little bit. And it was in that coasting, it was in the realization that I could actually just stop and not do something for a little while, that my squeeze came, right? Because, and I'm sure other people can relate to this, the economic downturn the pandemic caused, like everything that I'd been planning, every single plan I had for 2020 was like up in smoke. Every single thing, any possible future I had seen for myself, my plan A through plan Q, it just magically disappeared overnight. And that felt like a squeeze. It felt like a real squeeze. Because I was like, well, what happens now? Like, what comes next? I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's right. I had thought of my business and my work in this like very contained, prescribed, easy to describe way. It was like, well, yoga teacher, kind of do freelance on the side, blah, blah, blah. But that was kind of getting blown to hell. And now there was all this empty space. I wasn't being distracted by teaching classes or dealing with guests or customers. I just had lots of time to do nothing but think, which historically is not always like the best place for me. My imagination is very good at coming up with bad scenarios to things and trying to help me, plan out stuff like crazy. But this time around, it was uncomfortable for sure, like without question. I'm not suggesting it wasn't. But what was interesting about that pandemic time for me was in having all that time to just sit and imagine, really be open to imagining a completely different alternative to my life. You know, what the pandemic posed for me, what I saw very early on was we get to decide what the next normal is going to be if we want to. We could just choose. We could just choose to make a new normal, you know? And I think it was sitting in that question of what do I want my new normal to be? What do I want it to be? You know, I don't, now all of a sudden all the rules seem to be gone, you know, like travel rules seem to be gone, economic rules seem to be gone, political rules seem to be gone, like everything just like upside down land crazy. And I saw myself having this moment where it was like, yes, I could take all that chaos and turn it into a dystopian Handmaid's Tale, like 1984, like find some other sci-fi example of how bad it could be. Or alternatively, I could be like, all right, the rules don't apply. So maybe I could entirely change the goals of the game. Because really, to change the goals of any game, you really have to change the rules of the game. So now the rules don't apply. I could make my own rules. I could change my own goals. Like why not just sit in that question for a period of time? And I allowed the ideas to bubble up. I started pulling out Post-it notes and note cards, and anytime some new concept or new idea came to me, I would just write it down and like stick it up on my mirror. You know, and watching the evolution of the ideas change over time, you know, shifting there, I don't know, maybe this fits here, you know, just kind of mind mapping it for myself very visually. And over time, it was like allowing those ideas to sit, allowing me to just sort of get more and more comfortable with those ideas that then ended up leading to me launching the business in the form that it is, which it probably won't stay in this form forever, you know, like it'll continue to evolve. I'm still evolving it. But the way that I was characterizing this shift through the squeeze, you know, allowing for that divine timing to help navigate me through the squeeze of, well, what comes next? How do I figure this out? I was using an analogy of climbing Mount Everest. So, you know, those months after the pandemic initially hit and we saw that the world was beginning to slowly close and, you know, our economic livelihoods all changed seemingly overnight, right? I liken that time to sitting at the base camp of Mount Everest. And the wind is howling and it's sleeting and it's snowing and you're in your little tent and you're huddled and everything's shaking and you're like, why am I here? What am I doing on Mount Everest? Like, why have I chosen to come here? Like, this feels terrible and scary and hard, you know? And in that tight, compressed, claustrophobic space of how do I get out of this? How do I make this through? What happens next? You know, I just have to sit tight and wait out this storm of ideas, this storm of fears, this storm of illusions, the storm of all the negative self-talk and self-criticism, all the storm of judgments about what you think is possible, and the limiting beliefs that tell you can't do something a specific way because you've decided mentally that that's true. And in sitting that out, in allowing myself to kind of like be through that and really witness it, as well as allow the ideas to come up, allow the ideas to sit and not have to make specific sense of them, just watching them all come together over time, you know, and not on a time scale. You know, if I had chosen, I would have figured it out in one afternoon, right? Dust it, get that done, right? Like, and that wasn't what happened. It was months. It was months of different ideas percolating and coming together, right? But when I gave myself permission to just surrender to a timing that was beyond my conception of how time should work, when I was willing to just allow the ideas to unfold despite my impatience. I described to my friend the other day that in allowing for things to unfold that way, more gently, which I feel grateful that the pandemic allowed, right? If things hadn't shut down completely, I think I would have been distracted enough that I would have kept avoiding allowing myself to really just let the information and ideas come. You know, I could have just continued to fill my time and my brain with other things, and just would have kept kicking the can down. So what I was describing to a friend the other day was, in letting those ideas percolate and sit and letting them gestate, letting them grow, giving them time, giving them space, to come to fruition, it was almost as if the storm clouds parted. I'm still at the base camp, and I open up my tent, and the clouds have disappeared, the sky is bright blue, and the sun is shining directly on the mountain face. And I can see a path up. Whereas before it was cloudy and it was murky and I couldn't even see the top of Mount Everest. I didn't even know where the next step was. Now all of a sudden there was this clear path, that straight shot up to the top, and I still have to climb Mount Everest. That didn't go away. I still have to do it. I still have to actually climb it. I have to actually execute on this idea that now seems very clear for me. So right now it's a test of endurance. Like, can I commit to continuing to work and develop on this idea that I now see the clear path to, as a consequence of having let the idea fully develop to a certain respect. And when I mean fully develop, I don't mean like I know exactly how everything's going to work and it's all done. Just, I had to get to a place, by fully develop, I had to get to a place where I accepted that this was what I actually wanted to do. Like, I gave myself permission in some way that those 3 months of squeeze was about me shedding a lot of judgments I had about what type of work I should be doing, what type of work I could do, what type of work is, socially acceptable for me to do. I had to spend a lot of time visiting all of these preconceived notions about what my life was supposed to look like, what it meant to be a digital nomad or a freelancer or a coach or whatever. That those months of squeeze was actually me allowing the storm clouds to part, and as a consequence of removing, I don't want to say completely removing, the clouds come in every once in a while, but like noticing that those were just my figments of my own imagination, I can really see that clear path to what my Mount Everest is. But that doesn't mean that I have finished the climb. I still have to climb it. But now I think, as a consequence of having faced that storm, having looked at what was holding me back from just committing to what it was that I wanted to do, it's still scary to climb Mount Everest, but I feel much more confident and sure that this is what I should be doing. Like, this is not should in the sense of you should do this, but in the sense of like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. This is what I want to be doing. This is what I feel called to do. So this is all meant to provide just an alternative, another example of how to face the squeeze, face that pinch, face that stuckness, and just know that being stuck doesn't have to it doesn't have to be the burden that I think we're told in Western societies. It doesn't have to be this thing that you beat yourself up about. It could also just mean that an idea, you're giving birth to an idea, and it needs its own time to come together, to become fully formed, for you to find acceptance for the idea that is developing. Your own resistance to what idea is beginning to form within you might actually be what is triggering that sense of stuckness, or that sense of being squeezed or pinched. So oftentimes so many times we're being called to step outside of ourselves in a particular way. And just the thought of that is so terrifying, that we resist what's being presented to us, what's being offered to us. So I look forward to hearing more about your own pandemic pivots. How has this time really served you in developing ideas that you had, or maybe shifted your own perspective about who you are in this world and how you want to be, or what new rules, what new goals are you shaping for yourself as a result of all the old norms being swept away. And I look forward to hearing how you face that squeeze yourself, and areas in which you can identify how divine timing has unfolded, maybe not how you wanted it to, but ultimately led to something beneficial. So I look forward to hearing from you.